Both were friends of mine. One was a doctor and anesthetist. He built his own hospital many years back. It is something those from Kerala would, I won't name it, but you would know it if I named it because it's visible on the side of the highway near Kochi. This gentleman unfortunately got COVID several months back. He's in his 60s. His condition, how unfortunately, became critical. He was treated in a major hospital near Kochi, in a corporate hospital, which is supposed to be a hospital with a charitable intent. Nevertheless, the gentleman developed respiratory failure and was put on a ventilator. He stayed on a ventilator for the first 47 days. At that point of time, he started deteriorating. He was put on what we call ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenator. In effect, till then lungs function was being done by ventilators. Now the heart's function was also taken over by a so-called heart-lung machine, a membrane oxygenator. And that was another 23 days. So at the end of more than 2 months, he eventually died. During these months, he was in intensive care unit. In the first few days, he was conscious. Towards after the end of 3 weeks, he became unconscious. Unfortunately, because it is COVID, he did not receive visitors. If it was not COVID-19, I will tell you what happens. The family ordinarily would be allowed to see the person for 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening. Even then, the family is not allowed to touch the person because there are cables and wires all over. Even if they are allowed to, they would be scared. So here was my friend who died, and they could not pay the hospital bill. Though he was the owner of a major hospital, they did not have enough money to pay the hospital bill over 2 months and several days. His friends started a collection and gave the woman some money. The hospital surely will be sold to pay off the rest of the debt. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that the person is taken away to an intensive care unit, and then all the usual ways of our healing is lost. There are 17 people here now. Amongst you, many people would have lost a loved one in your life. I would guess at least 4 or 5. At some point of your life, you have lost a mother, a father, a grandparent, an uncle, aunt, somebody. And those people would know that spending the time with the person towards the end of life is very painful. If you have had a relative, I'm sorry, this is lived experience for some of you. If you had a relative who went through cancer or dementia or Parkinson's or something like that, the time that the person lived with the disease is not only hurtful to that person, it's agony for the whole family, right? But that also is a time of healing for the sense of loss. Eventually, when the person goes, you have had a period of time to get used to the idea. You have the feeling that you have been able to care for the person. And then when the person dies, there are the rituals. At a time when the family feels he is gone and our life is empty, there are relatives in the house. The extended family comes together usually, not in COVID, otherwise. And then there are the rituals. Different religions, different groups, different states have different rituals. But generally, they all involve touching the body, maybe touching the feet. They all involve praying together. And uh, in my in the environment that I grew up in, there is a ritual of feeding a few grains of rice into the dropping a few grains of rice into the mouth of the dead person. That's also a ritual, a last meal. And then later on, there are rituals again. So for some people, it's the fifth day, some it is third day, so for 11th day, 16th day, 41st day, 45th day, etc. These rituals are also healing. Whereas for that person in the intensive care unit, there has been no time of caring for the person. The caring is done by nurses. There is no time of touching the body, touching the person, touching the body later. No rituals. Most of the rituals not because of the COVID. So what am I saying? I am saying that in any death in an intensive care unit, you are losing many opportunities to heal. The loved ones find it hard, and not all get back to normal life. The majority get back to near normal life ordinarily in about 6 to 9 months, where the dead person is not a constant presence anymore. Those thoughts are still there, but you learn to get on with life. But when the death is so traumatic, then often you lose that opportunity. My other friends who died on last Sunday, early morning. It is just 4 days. She had advanced cancer. She had 3 cancers in her life. It was a very close friend of mine. She lived with all the cancers, got cured of 2. The third one, unfortunately, couldn't be cured. And at the age of 74, she was seriously ill. Her husband was caring for her. She had 2 children, one in USA, one in India. The children took turns to leave their place of living, come and stay here, one after the other, with their spouses. Uh, she initially found it difficult to accept palliative care, but over some time, she came to accept it. And one of the major things that we did was to talk about the future. She lives in a town about 70 kilometers away from here. And 3 months back, when I visited her, I found her quite anxious. I asked to speak to her alone. We sat together. And I told her, you look anxious. You say what you see. You look anxious. It could be about several issues. It could be about the curability. It could be about what uncertainty about what happens. It could be about pain. It could be about breathlessness. Would you like to talk about what exactly keeps you anxious? She said, I know I cannot be cured, and that's okay with me, but I'm not sure where to go, which hospital to go to. There's a hospital quite close by. And she had a relative in a big hospital in Kochi. Where should I go? Then we talked about, I asked her, if you had a choice, how do you like your last days to be? She immediately said that, but that is not possible. I said, may not be, but let us talk about it. How would it like to be? She said, I would like to be here with my family. But I know that I have this cancer in the lung. I will be breathless. I cannot stay here. I will have to be in an ICU. From there, our conversations continued. We talked about she staying at home. We later got the husband involved, brought into the room. We talked together. We talked to her doctor friends. That over the next 3 weekend visits, we had agreed on a clear plan of action. She will stay at home. If she became very sick, her sister-in-law, who is a nurse, will come and stay with her. Her neighbor friend doctor would visit daily, but we together would decide on the treatment. Or for the last 2.5 months of her life, she was on morphine, a small dose. Several medications had to be added on. In the last 1 week, she also was put on dexamethasone to keep her breathlessness under control. On Christmas Day, she's a Christian, devout Christian. She attended Mass, the prayer, in her home, a priest coming home. They attended together, and I have a cherished photograph with me. On the last evening of her life, she fed a piece of holy bread to her husband, and her husband did that to her also. She went to bed at about 11. She was reasonably comfortable. When they checked at 3 o'clock, she was okay. When they checked at 5:30 again, she was dead. I gave you painted two pictures. One, a death with all modern facilities, life prolonging treatment. The other, a death at home, receiving palliative care. There are, after 18 people here, some would be willing to think about your own death. Not all, I know. Impossible. Many of you will not be able to think about your own death. Most of you are young people. Young people also sometimes are able to think about it. I would like to get chat responses from those who are able to think about your own death. Eventually, someday you also will have to die. Would you like to choose one of these kinds of deaths, or would you like something else? In an ICU, at home, or some other kind of death? You can take a moment to think, ladies and gentlemen, and then give me a response on the chat box. Sunita, thank you. At home. Mohan Kumar, at home. Mariam, at home. Shanti, at home. With my loved one in mountains, Kuldeep ji says. At home with my loved ones. All the responses that have come in so far, choose for death at home. But there is another side to it, ladies and gentlemen. My friend died comfortably at home because she received palliative care. If it were not available, are you sure you would still choose for that? If You feel breathless. If you are in agonizing pain, with your relatives not knowing what to do, would you still like to be at home? You can think about it. We'll try to find some answers now. I'm going to share my screen and share a presentation with you. These are the two kinds of death that we talked about. And everybody who sent a choice chose the first one. And I'm sorry about those lines, unsightly lines coming in. I don't know how that came about. That keeps coming up. We should know that India internationally is rather notorious for having very bad end-of-life care.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Raj. Could you please make it slideshow mode?
It is on slideshow on my screen, but Raju, if there is a problem, would you like to share the screen from your end?
Sir, give a second, sir. Let me take the presentation. I will share it.
Sorry, Raju, I could not hear you.
Please give us a moment, sir. We'll just display it right now.
How about now?
It's all right. It's perfectly all right.
I see. Okay, very good. So India comes amongst the worst 15 countries as far as quality of death is concerned. This was done by an international agency, Economist Intelligence Unit based in Singapore, with the involvement of the British Economist, the newspaper Economist, the publication Economist. You can say this is all Western propaganda, but some realities we will have to accept. India comes below Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania, Kazakhstan, the poor Kazakhstan. So many countries in quality of end-of-life care is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to change this. When I say we have to, I mean you, I, and all of us. Because there is nobody else going to come and change this. It doesn't suit the interest of the healthcare industry to change it. You can imagine what will be the profit margin for the healthcare sector if we choose this, and what it will be if you choose the intensive care. You and I and all of us will have to change the system. We can. It's already being done. So this horror has to stop. There are two needs. People like this lady, the million people dying in India every year, must receive pain relief and palliative care. Death at home can be a silly romantic concept if you do not treat their suffering. People should have access to palliative care, and end-of-life care must be made rational and not the mechanized, forbidden death, destroying the person and destroying the family. At some point of time, it would be good to ask ourselves, what is our duty of care? When I say our, I mean me and you. You as a volunteer become a healthcare provider. When you are caring for your loved one at home, you are a healthcare provider. When you are caring as a volunteer for someone else, you are a healthcare provider. And our duty, fundamentally, according to the definition by Indian Council of Medical Research, the bioethics unit, it is to mitigate suffering. It is to cure sometimes, relieve often, and to comfort always. And please note, the ICMR adds on line, there exist no exceptions to this rule. No question about it. There is no second thought about it. Healthcare providers' duty is to mitigate suffering. Who is going to do, say, a little bit of work for me? Among the participants, not the facilitators. This, can you please read it out for me? Just so that there is the monotony of my voice can be broken. This is, I have given the link at the bottom. You will be receiving this presentation. I would recommend that you read the whole article in the Hindu. So Sindhu is writing about her father in the ICU. So who is the volunteer who is going to read it out for me? Please unmute and offer yourself.
Sir, Sunita here. Can I go ahead?
Yes, Sunita, thank you very much. Opening batsman. Thanks.
My 85-year-old father, my best friend, was enduring raw, intrusive medical procedures against his own wish. All skin and bones, he looked defenseless and at the mercy of doctors, his arms tied up, vulnerable and agonized.
You see, she is a journalist. Sindhu is a freelance journalist, not a medical person. And because she doesn't have the blinders that we healthcare people have, she's able to see what's happening. Sunita, please continue to read one more sentence.
But I didn't want to infuriate the doctors in whose hands we had surrendered his body and who had broken down his body into isolated segments only they could put back together again, if at all.
Do you understand what Sindhu means by breaking down his body into isolated segments? She says her father was not being treated. The man's heart was being treated, kidneys were being treated, lungs were being treated by different specialists. She wanted to save him from that hell, but she couldn't. Her father went on pleading, please, please take me away, please take me away. And she felt helpless. Friends, a few years back, I think it was in 2015 or 14, in Delhi, at a palliative care conference, there was a public meeting in the evening. The public were asked to come and share their experiences with palliative care. Actually, just with a press release and press note, a lot of people came. They were generally angry. They were not sharing about palliative care. They were sharing about absence of palliative care. They were complaining how they felt. There are a lot of people who are going around feeling angry that this kind of thing is done. There are a lot of people who accept this. Families now, over 25 years, it did not happen 25 years back. In the 90s, the picture was very different. But now, ordinary, well-to-do families think it is normal to die in ICUs. That change has happened. The problem with that kind of death is in every domain of palliative care that we have learned. It is physical, it is social, it is emotional, it is spiritual. I am an anesthetist by training. I was an intensivist for many years. I know what happens in intensive care units. Intensive care miraculously saves lives. If it's a short-term illness, by supporting the life systems, organs, liver, kidney, everything, you allow the body to recover and eventually the person walks out of the hospital. It may take time. It is a lifesaver. But in the context of inevitable die in an incurable disease, intensive care becomes a vulgar obscenity. The physical suffering, I don't want to scare you needlessly, but you still need to know. This is about your own life also. The physical suffering is agonizing. A tube down your throat into the windpipe can be one of the most painful experiences in life. There are tubes all over the place, every orifice, needles going in and out. Physically, it is tantamount to torture. You have no more longer any human relations. Can you imagine a week without being able to smile at somebody? Without making a conversation with someone? Even if you're in a strange place, after the second day, at least in the morning at breakfast, you will want to talk to the waiter in the hotel. You lose all human connections. You only have machines, walking machines, wearing masks and gowns around you. Many people are in emotional distress, and up to 2/3 of senior citizens in ICUs become delirious. Many get agitated and panicky. And spiritually, people wish this kind of death is hell. This life is hell. Please take me away. They can't understand the meaning of it. And all these, each one of these things, as we know, worsens the other kinds of suffering. We have to recognize that whether it's any time with a serious illness or in end of life, the suffering can be the same. Not the same in all these domains. So when confronted with a person near the end of life, we have to think of all this. We have to make the person physically comfortable. Social relations have to be nurtured. Emotional support and spiritual support need to be given. I fully believe that for my friend who died last Sunday, that Christmas Mass, that feeding the holy bread, they were vitally important for her well-being and for the family's well-being all through. Actually, rather than thinking only about prolonging life, there are several questions that you will have to ask. Many people die receiving statins for controlling cholesterol even on the last day. Does it make any sense? Consuming tablets becomes such a difficult chore towards end of life. All unnecessary medications have to be stopped. But for that, the family will have to accept that death has become inevitable. Otherwise, they can't accept it. And all these routine blood checks have to stop. Just like Sindhu's article, I'll come back to the screen later. There's another article which I can share with you, anybody who likes to. And on his mother's last day of life, he saw a nurse drawing blood, one more puncture. He asked, what is it for? The nurse said it's for liver function test. He asked the doctor, why a liver function test? You said she cannot get cured. You said her death is inevitable. And the doctor said, I have to keep trying. We have to keep trying to the end. Trying to do what? The doctor is not sure. The doctor is confused. I know apart from me, there are a couple of other doctors in the group. and I think they will agree with me. We were never taught end-of-life care. The end of life is a time of great distress, but nobody taught us how to handle that. And we went on doing life-prolonging interventions because we did not know what else to do. From 2019, it has got into the curriculum. It will take a whole generation for the teaching to become rational. Before I move on, does anybody have any question about anything that I mentioned so far?
Yeah, Dr. Rajagopal, namaste. This is Ramakrishna from Mysore.
Namaste ji. SVYM.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know whether we have reached to that particular point, but it has been bothering me. When a person is at the end of life, gasping for air, difficulty in breathing, is it ethical or unethical to provide something to soften his breathing, and which may result in probably at some point of time he may be exiting from this world? Is there any ethical question here? And what if it results in after half an hour, 1 hour, if he exits from this world, and whether that medication of making his breathing comfortable, maybe it is also comfortable for the prime caregivers also. So is there any questions on the ethics?
To answer your question, Ramakrishna ji, I'll go back to the definition of healthcare providers' duty of care. Let me show it to you. Whether it is during the first year of life or the last day of life, the healthcare provider's duty is to mitigate suffering. It is to cure when possible, often relieve any discomfort, and comfort always. There is no exception to this rule. Ramakrishna ji, is your question answered?
Yeah, very, very much.
So let us
that is the
remember
focus.
Absolutely.
When the pain has to be addressed, when the suffering has to be addressed, this has to be done.
And this comes from the bioethics unit of the India government statutory body, Indian Council of Medical Research. Many countries have the duty of care defined by law, like in the UK. But in India, we do not have a law covering it. This is the closest to an official dictum that we have. So thank you for asking that very important question, which helps to highlight the point. Everybody who is listening to me, please remember this. There's no doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, someday I'll be in that bed. And when I am in that bed, I hope my caregivers, doctors, nurses, everybody will not have any question about the answer to Ramakrishnaji's question. Your responsibility at that time is not to stretch out my dying process by 2 more days. Instead, your responsibility is to mitigate my suffering. Thank you. Is there any other question? Anybody else? If not, I will proceed with my screen sharing. Is it on a slideshow now?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thanks. So we covered this and went on to this bit about routine, stopping unnecessary medicines, doing routine blood checks, and why poke tubes down the throat? Towards the end of life, any human being, unless it's a sudden death, which happens only to 10% of people, for most of us, the dying process is over several days or weeks. The appetite drops. The body cannot use nutrition. And today, there is this horrendous practice. Everybody gets a tube down the throat. About my friends, family, though they were prepared, 4 days before her death, her son quietly asked, Uncle, my dad says no, but I am worried that mom is not eating anymore. Should we put in a tube to feed her? I had to explain again that when the body rejects food, there is no appetite. You can only put it into the stomach and cause more discomfort. You have no way of getting it absorbed into the bloodstream to be utilized by the cells. All invasive procedures, unnecessary invasive procedures, catheters here and there, they are to be avoided. A urinary catheter is necessary for comfort. If it is necessary for comfort, not for measuring the urine volume, for comfort, that may become necessary. So if possible means, if it is necessary for comfort, we will do it. When new nurses join our team, are there any nurses in the group? Sometimes I ring up the hospital in the night and ask, hey, how is so and so? He was very sick today. If it's a new nurse who has just come in, she will say, or he will say, sir, his pulse rate is so much, his BP is so much, his respiratory rate is so much, etc., etc. After the person's first month in palliative care, if I ask, the same nurse will say, sir, he is sleeping now. He asked for food. He was fed a little soup. His family is with him. His son has come from Bengaluru and they are together. See, we are used to that physiology, bodily functions. We have been taught to ignore human beings, look only at organs. That's what has changed in a month. The attitude shifts to the human being, not only the body organs. People start thinking about how is he, not what is the BP. Oh, if the BP is important, we'll check it. But we know that in the last day of life, BP has to drop. Oxygen saturation has to drop. Serum sodium has to drop. Even in position change, otherwise, if somebody is bedbound and unable to move by himself or herself, we'll be changing the position every 2 hours to prevent pressure sores. On the last few days, we will see that may be causing too much of discomfort. The nurse comes in to change the position and the person is finally sleeping. Maybe she will go back, come back after 1 more hour. Maybe you will do other things to relieve the pressure. If the patient is unconscious, we can use a pressure relieving mattress, like water bed or air bed. If it's a conscious person, they may not be very comfortable with that if it's introduced all of a sudden. We already talked about the place of death. You said it will be in your home. But if I ask you a little more, you will say something else. Not only just in your home, you would like to be in your bed. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, you all have a particular side of the bed, right? Everybody who is married here, you have one side, your spouse has another side. You don't switch the sides too often. We are connected. We are connected to some things, like my side of the bed. That's where we are used to being. You feel you belong there. So this is something that is possible only if we discuss earlier. If for my friend, the discussion had not started 2 months back, they could not have accepted this. If we introduce the discussion only in the last week of life, it's very hard. People haven't had time to think. You all of a sudden go and give them, hey, where do you want to be? We can keep you here at home, or you can come to the hospital, or we can be in the ICU. What do you want? That question is horrendous. You can't take a decision like that off all of a sudden without mentally preparing for it. The place of death has the physical comfort factor, the relevance of the social interactions with the family. It is not always good. I know of one person who actually traveled from his town, very popular politician. He traveled from his town to come and stay in a hospital in another city, in the city I was living in, because back home he was very popular. He would have about 150 visitors every day. He left there, too many connections. There are always exceptions. So in every aspect, the place of death is important. But we said that we romanticized place at home. Everybody said at home. Remember, there are lakhs of senior citizens living alone in their homes. In my state of Kerala alone, which has only 3% of India's population, we have nearly 1.5 lakhs of elderly living all alone. Even people living with a home nurse doesn't come into this calculation. It's totally alone. And if left to be romantic, death at home, what kind of death will she die? So there are always exceptions. Let us not romanticize home too much. If possible, death at home, yes, provided you have people to care for you, and provided palliative care can reach you in your home. If not, if you cannot assure that, when my time comes, I would rather be in a hospital room. Not in an ICU, but in a room where any family available can be with me. Sometimes, what happens to the social aspect for this lady? Zero relations. Nobody cares. Even today, somebody was brought into her ICU, abandoned by the family. I mean, no close relatives, distant relatives do not care. And the man was desperate and in some place, and now delirious. We brought him in. What kind of social connection can we build? Friends who are all listening, too many people are invisible here. Mohan Kumar, Vailangi Nazira, Meena, Sindhu, Nerissa, what can be done? Think. You can be the only people who care. It is horrendous that people die lonely deaths. They need people to care for them. Did I show you this picture already? So in the first session? Maybe not. Right? Do you remember this photograph?
No, sir.
This woman was an inpatient in our place. She had no children. She was unmarried. And her siblings sort of deserted her. They wanted her to hand over all their property to her. She said, I have written a will. I will not hand over anything now. So the relationship was broken. She was in our intensive care, our palliative care unit. We had a group of students visiting us from USA. There were 12 of them. One of the girls was an introvert. She wouldn't have a lot of friends. She would sit quietly in a corner. So all the other people were excitedly doing something or other. And this girl was sitting alone in a corner. So our patient, this lady, just called her. This woman did not know a word of English. This girl did not know a word of Malayalam. But they struck up a relationship. Every day, as soon as she comes into Palim, India, the girl would go straight to this lady. They would sit there, hug, exchange pleasantries. This person may even offer some snacks to her and she to her. They formed a connection. So Mohan Kumar, Rajini, let me ask you, if you have a destitute person being cared for by your institution, is there any reason why you can't be the only relative for that person? Strike up a relationship. Convey that you care. Oh my God, what a huge blessing will be for that person to feel that someone cares. Social relationships will have to be built from the community. Sometimes students, college students and school students come and become those relatives. And sometimes even the most destitute have to feel that they have to leave something behind. How are we doing for time? Oh, I don't have a lot of time, but I must tell you this story. Who is Cicely Saunders? Do you know? The founder of modern palliative care. Cicely Saunders, during her, when she built her first hospice, St. Christopher's Hospice in London, had a Polish Jew who had no relatives in UK. He was brought in. They became friends, struck a close relationship. And at the time of his dying, he had 500 pounds saved. He said, I am leaving to you. I want to be in a window. I want to be a window in your home. And actually, in St. Christopher's Hospice, one window is named after him. The people need to feel that they leave something behind often. It is up to us to find out the opportunity, talk to them, get their stories. Nibun, Kuldeep, one of the most precious things that you can do is just to listen to the story of their life. Listen to them, ask them, tell me about your childhood. Where were you born? And then get the stories. And then you will build a relationship. It's a precious thing. And even if the person appears to be unconscious, remember that they may be able to hear. How do you know? Keep communicating. Tell them what's happening. If the family is available, encourage their presence. And particularly remember children. Bring the children. It's good for the elderly man who may be dying. It's good for the child to see what's happening, to have that last picture. And always facilitate any religious rites that are necessary. And you have chosen one of these. Like me, you would choose this. Inappropriate artificial life support measures usually cause physical, psychological, and social suffering, and we have to replace it with palliative care. And if you do, let us not get confused with euthanasia. Euthanasia is an intentional act of killing somebody. Ramakrishna ji asked, would you give morphine at that time? I did give morphine to my friend who died last week. The family understood it. The person may die in half an hour, but I know that I did not give a lethal dose. Euthanasia is killing. Allowing natural death is not euthanasia. Please remember, euthanasia, with all good intentions, is deliberately ending a life. Allowing natural death is not euthanasia. There is nothing called passive euthanasia. It's very often used in a 2018 Supreme Court judgment. The word was used. Euthanasia cannot be passive. There is an act of ending life. Withhold, Ramakrishnaji, this is part of the answer to your earlier question. Withholding, this is also from that ICMR document. Withhold or withdrawing a potentially inappropriate patient treatment in a patient dying with a terminal illness cannot be construed as an intention to kill. So even if you disconnect a ventilator, you are still allowing only natural death. I have written an advance directive, ladies and gentlemen, saying that I do not want my life prolonged on artificial life support. I have not only written it, I have discussed it with my wife and my children, made sure that they understand and they agree. If already the patient is on a ventilator or something like that, you have to make sure that 3 physicians together from the evaluation and decide that the situation is not salvageable. Listen to the family, answer their questions, and then only we can proceed. I see that we still have 7 minutes more, which I think I'll reserve for any questions and answers.
If anyone has any questions, kindly unmute and speak up.
Sir, Mohan Kumar is here.
Yes, Dr. Mohan. Yes, Mr. Mohan.
Yes, sir. What if an unconscious patient is there, old age unconscious patient is there,
Yes.
and their relatives are there, and doctor says there is no chance of survival of that unconscious patient. And at that time, is it possible the relatives can give an verdict saying that there is no need for any CPR or something else, which is what we do in the intensive care unit, or the patient has to give a will?
If the person has not left a will, even if the person has left a will, Mr. Mohan Kumar, if the family is fighting you, you can't implement it. That's the reality. You have to carry the family with us. But even if the patient is willing, it's always good to explain to the family. Sometimes I know there can be problems. Unless this is started early enough, the family will not be able to accept it. Sharing my screen again to answer that question. Take time. Give realistic treatment options only. Continue existing measures. Do not go on to the next thing and next thing. Continue and give them time. People need time. If the family says, okay, non-invasive ventilation is okay, maybe we'll have to accept that. We should remember that the family shouldn't be in guilt after the person's death. And one magic sentence that should not be spoken, black magic, there's nothing else to do, nothing more to do. That's not true. If you say there is nothing more to do, the family cannot accept it. Instead, what I will say is, even if his life cannot be salvaged, we will always do everything to keep him comfortable as long as he is alive. When you say that, most probably they will accept it. So, in a short answer, if the person is unconscious, if the person has not left an advance directive, whatever the next of kin decides goes. But they must be given time. Thank you, Mr. Mohan Kumar. Have I answered your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sunita asks, if a patient has severe unbearable pain and want to die due to pain which is not coming down with medicines, how do we handle this? Sunita, we in palliative care are quite used to people coming and asking, please kill me. And we even had family members coming and say, please kill him, I can't bear to see this. You treat their pain, and next day they sit up and eat breakfast and ask some other question. But if the pain cannot be treated effectively, usually at least partially it can be treated, but may not be to the patient's satisfaction, we will have to walk with the patient in their painful journey. This happens, unfortunately. We are not always able to take care of everybody's pain. It happens maybe in 2% of people, and then we don't reject the person. We still say there's nothing more we can do. What we will not give any false promises either. I have actually said this to patients. I know that everything that I have done so far has not helped you. We will continue to look after you, at least to make sure that your pain does not get any worse. And once I'll always remember Patu, my patient. I told Patu this. Patu, I know that I have not significantly reduced your pain. And Patu immediately grabbed my hand and said, please don't ask me not to come back here. She said, this is the only place where somebody cares. I want to be able to come back to here, even if you are unable to take care of my pain. So Sunita, we'll walk with them on their journey, whether it's with pain or without pain.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Any other questions or any comments?
I have a question, Raju.
Yes, sir.
With the mask, I can't recognize who is the person sitting next to you who was here all this 1 hour.
Manisha was there, sir.
Who?
Manisha. Manisha, sir.
This is Manisha sitting in front of me.
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay. We really should have nameplates on the mask. Thank you, Manisha. Anybody, any last question?